Where do you go? Okay, so here's one. What do you recommend? So let me actually read you the full question. Okay, this is just a short version of the question, so the title is easier, but the question is actually a lot longer than this. Um, Let me see here. Okay, here we go. Hello, English Streaming. I have a question. I am a non-native speaker. When I code, I spend lots of time refactoring my code comments. I was using GitHub Copilot, which helps me a lot on the code side, but not commenting. Do you have any recommendations? I'm going to really, really avoid making a comment on GitHub Copilot, other than to say use of GitHub Copilot for an enterprise project is probably illegal, because it has been proven to have cached proprietary code, and any enterprise that has any amount of requirement for legal pedigree on code that's been committed will, if they find out you're using Copilot, the legal team will come after you. And if I know this is true at IBM, I don't know about other companies, but be very careful about using Copilot on any proprietary enterprise project that you don't own, because it's very likely that somebody's finally going to sue somebody over use of it, because they should, because it's got tons of code, illegally obtained code inside of it, embedded in it, including stuff like it's got illegal, like you know, tokens and shit that'll like allow people to break into systems, because they didn't care. They just pointed it at a huge code base on GitHub without doing any checking whatsoever on the code. I didn't want to make this about Copilot, but I'm just telling you, make absolutely sure that you know about that. So comments. Let's get back to the comments thing. All right. So the code comments. The only real recommendation I can tell you is don't start with the code comments. So I would say start with the simplest code comments possible. And you know what? Maybe turn your TODOs into comments, right? I would say don't write stupid comments that restate the obvious. I fucking hate this. I get that. I read that all the time. Just don't do that, right? Don't. If you think you have to have code coverage, or you're going to get some rank that's wrong because you don't have a comment, so you write a file like. I mean, the people who do that should really be slapped. I mean, they should be slapped. They should be taken in a corner and slapped. Not really. I'm not saying there should be violence involved. Metaphorically slap. It just drives me crazy. Okay. But okay. Let's see. Have a native English speaker review or write the comments. I mean, this goes without saying, right? I don't know how many times I have read stuff from people who don't speak native English, and they put comments, and it gets into production code, and nobody cares, and it just makes it. I'm like, this doesn't have any semblance of reality, and they didn't even have. Look, if you are already doing peer review, which you should be doing, make sure that the native speakers do as well. I mean, if you should at least have one native language speaker on your team. If you don't have a native language speaker for that target language, then you're doing it wrong. I'm sorry. You can get mad at me, and I feel so bad for the people who have to learn English in addition to everything else that work in tech. I didn't make the rules, and I got born in America, which is not really English, right? It's American English. American. I speak American. But, you know, and you know, so the other thing too, avoid the temptation to spend too much time on comments up front. And I'm gonna throw some shade on myself here. I cannot tell you. In fact, there's definitely somebody in the Twitch stream right now who's going to laugh at this, because I know they've seen me do this. I love to write, and I think while I write. So when I'm working through an algorithm or I'm working through code that I'm going to write, I will write it out. So I'll say, well, fine, I'm going to write the comment. So I will write a comment for a function, which ends up needing to be like 3 functions, or, a structure with 2 methods and a function and maybe another package function and some default instance of that function, right? But that's not how it starts out. It starts out as a comment. And so I say, fine, I'm going to write the comment first. I'm going to do comment-driven development, right? And so I start, thank you for the follow. I'm like writing the comment, like I'm tapping out my comment. And then I get this whole comment done, and it's all beautiful and everything. And I don't have to tell you how hard it is to write. I mean, even if you have a really great IDE, comments are a pain in the butt, no matter what language you're doing them in, because you're writing markup. It's like a language. It's syntax, right? You gotta have the title and the header in the right place. You got to do indentation for certain things. I mean, you end up writing all this great code, but you end up throwing away the comment. So I cannot tell you how many times I have spent my time writing the comments, which I would like to tell myself was worth it mentally, because it helped me get my head around what I was doing and making better code in the long run. Maybe so, but most of the time I feel like it was a waste of time. I feel like I just totally wasted my time. I just needed the basic to-dos. Okay, this is what it needs to do, and this is what it needs to do, and this is what it needs to do. And then, I do think that you should take kind of a fluid approach to your coding, and you shouldn't spend too much time in analysis up front. You should just start writing it. And then when you get the code done, you'll be like, okay, now I see where this is going, and it needs a layer of refactor early. Kind of very agile to do that way, right? And it needs a layer of refactor. So then we refactor that before we make a release of it or something. We keep that all in a separate PR or whatever, separate branch. And then you can just kind of let it flow and just move around. I don't like analysis paralysis. Oh, thank you. I mean, I've been paralyzed by overthinking how code should be or what a name should be so many times. And many times people have actually seen that. Wow, 2 subs, thank you. And, people see these things and they're like, oh, they 3 subs. God, we're going to get a hype train. So I just have to say that this has been one of those things that I just have to own up to. So I am not a comments person early on these days. What I like to do is I like to come at it. I like to do the minimal comment up front, so I know what I'm doing. God, so many subs. And then after that, what I do is I'll come back to the code, and after the code has been refactored, ever since I started changing to do this, and I have to admit it's probably been about the beginning of this year, especially in my Go code, I've noticed that what ends up happening is my code gets refactored out, right? And by the time it comes to making my example tests and everything, okay, I'm like, now I'm ready, right? So, because once you have an example test, you're like, okay, this is a consumable piece of code that a user is going to read about, or a developer is going to read about, and they're going to understand it. And so when I'm writing the example, then I'm like, okay, now it's time to flesh out that comment of what this thing is doing. And that would be the time to bring in a native speaker. It could be an intern that you're not even paying. You should pay your interns, by the way. But, it could be anybody. You just bring in somebody else and say, here's an example of the code. This is how it's working. Now, write our code documentation for us, go flesh out what these algorithms are doing. And by the way, if you're an intern and you feel like you're getting, stepped on by being asked to do this, think again, because you're being asked to review the code base and learn in the process. I mean, that everybody will tell you, well, how do I learn Go or whatever, right? You read Go, you read good code, you go in there, you evaluate it. So, becoming a QA person or an intern or an evaluator or somebody who's just making sure the code's been written well, has good documentation, is a wonderful opportunity, particularly for beginners, to learn about code. So if you're, the junior, don't use that word, by the way, use entry level or something. Don't call yourself a junior ever. So if that's you, then just accept it and go for it. And if you're a foreigner, then you could, you don't speak the language, you can go to that person and you could get them to input, and then you can talk back and forth with them and make a good friend, and get him a beer or something, and you're good. You're good to go. And lots of subs, thank you. So that's all I really have to say about that. But I can't overstress this last one. I'm not saying don't write comments. See, there's too much of a good thing, my friends. There's too much of a good thing. I mean, you might think, that really freaking long names is a great thing, right? Because it makes I don't have to write comments. I got really big ass long names that I have to, and I have a really big fat bloated IDE that can automatically complete my 50 character long identifiers. Or I can go in and redo my comments all the time. So you might think that these things are a good idea, but yeah, and one of those things that I've always been, rough on myself and others about is like, oh, you don't have comments in your code. You suck. You're a bad person. And like, actually, I would rather have smaller identifiers that are more to the point, that make the code easier to read. And if anybody, this is sort of related, right? But so like, I'm going to put this too. Avoid the temptation to put your documentation, your docs into your identifiers. People hate huge identifiers. They do. They can say they like them all they want. Oh, the names. I have the proper names. I don't need to do it. No, that's bullshit. Because unless you're gonna like rename the struct, so I guess it depends on the localized scope. You can probably get away with that, right? And just make sure you don't. I'll keep that one out of there. That was kind of mean, but just avoid the temptation to use really, 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 really long names as a replacement for your for your good documentation, because it's just nobody wants that. They don't want that. Any IDE, if you hover over the name, it will give you the entire documentation. Let me show you. So like you're talking doc stuff, right? So here I'm doing keg. Let me go in my command here. This is all document related, I promise. So file path join. I wonder how to document that. Shift K. There it is right there. File path join. Blah, 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 blah. File joins, blah, blah, blah. Now, what would you have rather had? Join the string with the thing and the thing here, like, some like big ass long thing. And the other thing I like really about Go is that they incorporate the package name is something called don't stutter into the thing. So file path join, right? If join were just by itself, it would be like join file. If you had some generic package, it would be some generic package name dot join file path, right? But one of the things I really love about Go is that the culture, the idiomatic Go way to do this is to create packages that have meaningful names that then the verbs and stuff, the things and the verbs they become qualified because they've got the package, and then the package can be the other stuff. But so I don't need a long identifier for this because I can look it up anytime. And this is Vim, for God's sake. I mean, people give me a bad time because I'm using Vim all the time and I don't have a big powerful IDE. Well, I don't need it because I have capital K. By the way, this has worked in Vim for more than 2 decades. People don't know about this. They don't know that almost every language that supports it has, render's not supported that's because I haven't imported it yet. That will be there as soon as I import it. I mean, but it works for anything like this one. Even you can like look at this one there. It says what that is, FS. Okay, so that's that one I haven't got yet. I haven't imported that one yet. But once it's imported, it'll like show you. Some of them aren't documented. Some of them are as equivalent to blah, blah, blah. I'm using this constantly. And by the way, this is why I don't like tab completion for this stuff. Because when I want to look up the syntax of a thing, I don't just want to hit tab and guess which one's the right thing. I usually want to see the little bit of notes that come with it. So I've got the full signature right there, and I can read all this stuff, and it's just as fast as if I had tab, and it doesn't fucking annoy me by popping up all the time. So this is a separate video. I'm kind of like doing 2 videos at once, so I'll stop. But it's another reason that you don't need to have excruciatingly long names, and you can just put the comments. But do make sure you have the comments because, for all those reasons we just covered. There's the current has to stay here because so that's interesting because this is an internal function, and that comment that's on that function it was there automatically. That's interesting because that's a private. I didn't realize that it was even going to highlight like that. That's really cool though. Invalid type error. Anyway, so yeah. I wonder why it said invalid type. Here's a long one. That's probably the longest you're ever going to see me write. I choose Dex with, and that is a pretty big ass name, I have to admit. But that is better than, and a shorter one with an options list. I guess I could do that. That'd be another way to go. That's about the longest you'll see me write, and that is pretty damn long, I'll admit. So anyway, have this. Let's go back. What were we looking at anyway? We were looking at this. Okay, so yeah, start with simple code comments. Work on them. Don't make them too big. Don't go crazy with your identifiers. Do make sure you write the code. Write enough of it in line so it prompts you to remind you during your development what it was for. Especially if you have an ID like mine, like Vim, that'll show you what you're doing while you're doing it, so you can remember what it was, why you named it that. And then have somebody review it before you publish it. That's really it.